Name and where you're from?
All right, my name is Joe Blundell, and I was actually born in Gravette, Arkansas. Spent most of my young life until I was about 7 near Knoll, Missouri on a blackberry farm, and spent my college, well, schooling and education years, grade school, middle school, high school in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Attended the Pittsburgh High School back in the 1990s, was known as Pharmacy High, and there was a really good reason for that name, for that institution. And I've been to several universities. I've studied extensively. I'm actually one class away from 6 degrees, 2 bachelors and 4 associates, and maintained a 3.75 GPA throughout all my education.
I see. So where are you from now?
I'm actually the residing mayor of Cliff Village, Missouri, a little town south of Joplin.
I see. It's fairly close, isn't it, to Joplin area?
Yes, it's. I could throw a stone into the Joplin city limits from our city limits.
One of the things I'm going to ask you about is about what actually got you into the news. We'll ask you about that in a minute, but before we get there, I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your accident. What brought you to this point?
Well, it was interesting. I had, when I was living north of Pittsburgh, I lived out by where the dog tracks are, north of Pittsburgh, and I was living on 10 acres, and one night on May the 5th of the year 2000, I had some friends come out and perform an intervention on me. I, of course, didn't know it was going to happen. That's, I guess, how an intervention takes place. But I was insane. Like, for all intents and purposes, one of the people said to me, and I quote, "You are by far the most self-centered, self-righteous, egotistical, egomaniacal son of a bitch that has ever walked the face of the earth. You have used and abused everyone and everything around you." And that guy was dead on. He had me pinned. I was an alcoholic. I was violent. I was a sorry excuse for a human. And after that night, I had what many would consider a very born-again religious experience, where I realized that there was a lot better things in life than just serving my own interests and serving myself. And after that night, I sold everything I gave away everything I owned except for a guitar, a parachute, and a little kitten that I had, and headed off to Europe. I backpacked around Europe for about 3 or 4 months, just pitching a tent on the side of the road off in the woods, and places like the Black Forest in Germany, old Moorish cannon towers in Italy along the Italian Riviera, and ended up meeting a person in my travels that lived in London, who was actually, incidentally, really good friends with Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page used to come over to his house and play guitar, so it was almost like a dream come true, getting to be acquainted with some of these people. And I actually ended up moving and living with Rodney for quite some time, until I got a job of my own. Ended up working at a couple different places in London, and on the morning of October 15th, had another strange experience. It was a weird morning, but later that morning, have you ever heard the term "mind the gap"? Well, whenever the trains are coming in to the train stations in London, I didn't do such a good job at minding the gap, and was crushed under the wheels of a 30,000-ton commuter train.
Wow.
It drugged me about 75 yards before it came to a stop. And when it finally came to a stop, man came underneath there, the emergency workers, and the first words out of his mouth, he looks at me and he's just like, you're still alive. And I was completely conscious the whole time, and I was like, yeah, do you think you guys can get me out from under here? He's like, we're gonna try. And it took them about 15 minutes. They had to get hydraulic jacks, and they had to get some sort of train crane to help lift this massive electric train engine off me. And they could only get it up so far off my back. One of the wheels of the train, of this massive train, was actually resting on the center of my spine, right between my T11 and 12 vertebrae. And the guy, one of the final emergency workers, came down underneath there, and he's like, well, we're gonna have to deflate your lungs to get you out the rest of the way. And he had a couple of big knives in his hand, and he said, I want you to let all the air out of your lungs, and as much as you can. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just, okay. And he took these 2 big knives, and he just popped them right in, and just blood out my mouth, fingers laying on the ground, just blood everywhere. the strange thing though is I really didn't think I was going to die. Even as grim as the situation looked, I thought I was going to be all right. And I was kept alive on machines for about 3 days. They had to get people, I have the rare blood type, and they had to get people from all over London to come in and do a couple of transfusions. I'd lost over half my blood when the whole thing was said and done with. And 3 days after being kept alive on life support, I ended up waking up. And the first words out of the doctor's mouth were, "Son, I don't know why you're alive. You should be in a lot of little bits somewhere in the morgue or in the bio-waste or in the landfill right now." And he's just like, "I know one thing for sure, you're being kept alive. You're being kept alive for some purpose, so you need to go do something with your life and make something of yourself." And it's like, "Yes, sir, let's go." And it was definitely a different situation. The medical industry and socialized medicine in England, I'd have to say, just from that standpoint, hands down better than ours. I mean, if I would have stayed over there, I would have received about a year's worth of rehabilitation, just mandatory. They would have given me all the equipment I needed. I came back to America, and after 2 weeks in a hospital, they said, "You don't have insurance, get out." And that was my training for my spinal cord injury. You don't have insurance, you need to leave. And it was like, okay. And so after I left, that's when the real trouble started. And it was because the doctors had me prescribed on morphine, codeine, and Demerol. And I'd have to say the first year and a half after the smushing of the train, it was a living nightmare. It was a nightmare of surreal proportions. I mean, the morphine would leave me strung out in bed like a heroin addict, hallucinating to the textured ceiling of my room. The codeine and Demerol would slow down my digestive system to the point where, well, a lot of people that are able-bodied that take these kind of opiates don't notice it because the natural movement of their body helps stimulate the digestion. Well, complete sedentary lifestyle, sitting in one spot or being strung out in bed, and your bowels would completely stop. I would literally sometimes, due to these medications, go 5-6 days without a bowel movement. Now, I can tell you, getting run over by a train hurts. Having someone stab knives into your side hurts. Having 3-inch titanium screws drilled into your spinal column hurts. Not having a bowel movement for 5 or 6 days is the most excruciatingly painful thing you can possibly imagine. It is. The pain of that, words would cheapen how bad that hurts. And this was, it's the doctor's natural side effect of the medicines we're giving you here. We'll give you this. And they give me this stuff called magnesium citrate. And it's essentially Drano for the human body. They would let me fill with crap for 5 or 6 days, and then they would give me Drano. And I would drink the bottle of Drano and go sit on a portable toilet for 5 or 6 hours and let pounds and pounds of fecal matter flush through my system. And this little system of constant sedation and my 1 day of complete expulsion was just the side effects of the medicine. That was just the doctors were, it's working fine for us, And I started looking into it a little bit. It's like, well, another one of the drugs they had me on. This was hilarious. When I had to talk to the doctor about this, they had me on a blood thinner called warfarin. I later found out from someone that warfarin is chemically no different than rat poison. And I went to the doctor and I said, "Hey, why are you giving me rat poison?" And he said, "Well, it's not rat poison." I said, "Well, it's chemically no different than rat." "Well, it's a very small amount." I was like, "Well, it's a small amount of rat poison then. It's still rat poison." And then I started looking into some of the other drugs that I was just completely strung out on. Something like codeine. I always thought it was like some sort of opium-based medicine. Well, it hasn't been based off of opium since 1973. They've been synthesizing it from coal tar and petroleum. And I look at this and it's like, now wait a minute. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, the doctors take the Hippocratic oath. Hippocrates was quoted as saying, "Let thy food be thy medicine, and thy medicine be thy food." I don't eat coal. I don't drink petroleum. Why are these people that have taken this oath shoving coal, petroleum, and rat poison down my throat, and then letting me chase it with a big bottle of Drano and saying this is okay? This is nonsense. This is anything but medicine. I mean, if you saw witch doctors doing this, you would say this is some sort of sick cabal of evil magic. It seems like there's some sort of sick cabal of evil magic. They're poisoning people on a daily basis with petroleum-based medicines, and then have the gall to tell me that if I put a seed in the ground and put water on it and let a little plant grow, that I can use to relieve this crippling, debilitating pain I feel every day, that I can spend 7 years in a cage because of that? I've had friends that have lost entire families to drunk drivers that get 5 years. And they're going to give me 7 for growing a flower? And it's just sheer economics of it. The first year after the accident, I cost my friends and neighbors, the taxpayers of Missouri, over $10,000 in prescription drugs. And it's just, well, wait a minute. Why do they have to front the bill at all? I can get my pain requirements met with this little seed that I can put in the dirt and put water on. Grows a flower, I take the flower, and you know what? When it's legal, that'll be the last time I smoke. I hate smoking. I don't enjoy the feeling of breathing smoke. Whenever I'm by a campfire and there's smoke blowing at me, I get the hell out of the way. Well, when it becomes legal, I'm going to eat it. I'm going to eat my flowers. I'm going to bake it into my baked goods. I'm going to put it in my pasta sauce. I'm going to bake it into brownies. I'm going to make, I'll do a lot of stuff with it. But it will be mine. It will be my pain medication that I have produced for myself. I won't be selling it to anybody. I won't be... It's for my benefit. But the way the system's set up now, I mean, yeah, the thing that got me off doctor's medication was I was out walking one day, walking the neighbor's dog, and had this basset hound that used to just scream like crazy. I got tired of listening to it suffering its little 4-foot by 8-foot cage, and I took it out one day. And on the way back, I ran into a neighbor that was like, hey, why don't I ever see you out in the village? And it was, well, I'm strung out on morphine, codeine, and Gymrol. And he says to me, hold on a second, let me get something for you. He goes in his house, and he comes back out the joint, and he says, you go take this and try this, see if it helps you. And well, I took it back, and I sit in my garden, and I smoked that. And it was, not only did the pain go away, but I wasn't drugged out of my gourd.
Tell me about the pain.
Anytime there's a weather change, anytime I move around too much in my wheelchair, anytime I wake up in the morning, it's excruciating.
What kind of mobility do you have right now?
I have T11 and 12 right here. It's nothing beyond that. Though in the past year and a half, I've been getting feeling back in my left leg, and unfortunately, my left buttocks, that I actually have a decubitus ulcer from all that time I spent strung out of morphine in my bed, gave me a decubitus ulcer that quite literally, it's interesting from an anatomical and physiological standpoint. I can take my finger right now and touch the bone of my skeletal system. I can physically touch one of my bones. There's a hole in my body that big. And it doesn't feel like kitten's purring. Sometimes I don't feel it at all. Sometimes I feel it so bad, I'll start throwing up. I mean, it's pain so bad that I'll throw up.
A lot of people will probably say, well, how is cannabis going to help that level of pain?
It does. It completely helps it. It relaxes me to the point. It's not really a numbing either. It's kind of a better feeling. It's replacing the feeling of excruciating pain with replacing it with the feeling of almost comfort and soothing.
I've often said for myself, and I've often heard other patients say too, they said it's different because it's like you're distancing yourself from the pain. Rather than numbifying your body to the point that you don't have it anymore.
I could definitely agree with that statement, because that's what it doesn't feel like. It doesn't feel like a numbing effect. It feels like it feels like I'm consciously changing what the pain is and what it means. It's no longer such a negative. It's just, okay, I feel better, I can cope with this, I can live with this. And not only could I live with it, but while I was on the doctor's medications, I spent my time watching TV strung out in bed, watching my ceiling strung out in bed, and crying. You know, that's a real productive lifestyle. Well, after I found the medicinal medical effects of cannabis, I started living, I started getting out in my community, and I got involved in my community. I actually started going around and asking people in the community, hey, you know, what's going on? And I started finding out that in my community, there had been 5 people that died in the last 10 years of a rare bladder cancer. We're talking about a community of like 33 people. Almost everybody's dogs were sick and dying of some sort of weird cancerous condition. And I just I asked everybody in the village, hey, has anybody checked the water? Nobody checked the water.
What kind of industry is there around there?
There was a burying plant about 2 miles upstream from us that about a decade earlier had buried grams of trichloroethylene in the foundation of their plant. And of course, when the foundation cracked, all the TCE comes rolling down the river and contaminates all the village wells. Not all of them, but some of the village wells had high contents of lead, and several of the village wells had dangerously high contents of trichloroethylene. And well, it literally took me a long time to even get the Department of Natural Resources or the EPA to even come out and test these wells. Well, during my efforts to do this, the people in the town decided to make me the mayor. They thought I would have a little more pull as the political leader, so they gave me the title, the Honorable Joseph T. Blundell, and I got to call people for the EPA and use that title. And it was, you know, you would have thought that having dangerously high levels of trichloroethylene in a well next to a daycare would be something that would prompt immediate action, but it did nothing but prove to me how deeply flawed the system has become. Because quite literally, the trichloroethylene was 4.8 parts per billion, and for the EPA to legally have to do anything, it had to be 5 parts per billion. I say to this guy, I say, is this a safe amount for the kids to be drinking? According to the government, yes. I said, can I bottle some of this stuff up to send home for your kids to drink? He was like, that's not even funny. I said, no, it's not. You know, and it took me 2 years before I could even get all these contaminated wells on a bottled water program. I had assurances from the Missouri American Water Company that they were going to run water lines out in 2005, 2006. Here it is 2009, and I ain't seen a water line in sight. You know, it's sad. We've got children in our village bathing in lead and trichloroethylene. They're not drinking anymore, at least. But it was from my involvement in that, I really kind of got active in the village and had been active in the village for a long time. And just last late August, we had a village meeting. I do village meetings, you know, 3-4 times a year. And we had a village meeting last August, and basically went through a lot of the stuff in the village, and at the end of it, I had written up a little proposal, and it was actually, the original one was called Ordinance 421. It isn't the one that we ended up voting in, but the proposal I made, I basically got the attention of everybody in the village, said I'd like to propose a bill to legalize medical marijuana here in the village. And then I went into my story. I just gave them the spiel. I told them about how I lived under the doctor's medications and how profoundly improved not only the conditions of my life became after I found cannabis, but how much their lives benefited from me finding cannabis. Of course, yeah. And you know, I went down to fiscal reasons as well. The fact that I was costing them tens of thousands of dollars in the couple of years that I was using doctor's medication, 1.5 years. And it was just like, I went through all my reasons, and overwhelming support. Everybody in the village was just so behind me. Just came up. There was a couple people at the meeting that didn't say anything because, well, they were being outnumbered by everyone else that was in positive support. Everybody came up. We totally support you on this, 100% behind you.
Now now to kind of put this in the right framework for other people who might be seeing this video now, what you did was a city ordinance that basically encompassed the municipality that you were in. And this was, for the state of Missouri, the second city ordinance to be passed within the state, because we have one in Columbia, Missouri also, correct?
That's it.
Okay.
And I actually, what I did, whenever I was looking at it, and during the time before I was actually going to do this bill and finalize it, I found out about House Bill 277. Actually, Kelly from the Joplin Normal chapter had mailed me that. And I read it and was like, okay, this is a lot more reasonable than the bill that I proposed. The bill I proposed was a bit far-fetched, but was just made and designed to make a statement nonetheless. I have no illusions that it gives me some sort of, it's a paper shield as far as keeping me out of jail or anything like that, but I really wanted to spark the rational discussion about it at the state level. I had called the representatives a couple years past that had sponsored similar bills and asked them why I didn't get in. And I guess it's always been pocket vetoed. They always basically don't assign it, they don't do it, they don't talk about it. And you look at the reasons cannabis became illegal in the first place, and there's a whole discussion on that end. But then you look at the fact that, wait a minute, 2005 Gallup poll, 78% of Americans are in favor of supporting the legalization of medical marijuana. And it's like, what? Excuse me? When I went to school, I learned that a democracy was something about majority rule, something about voting. How is it that a 78% majority in our country is not getting heard? What's going on? This doesn't sound right at all. This sounds like we have a few key people in power that are upholding the business and drug pushing industries that like to feed me rat poison, coal tar, and petroleum. I don't eat rat poison, coal tar, and petroleum. I will not eat it anymore. I don't want to touch this stuff. And to have the audacity to tell me that growing a flower out of the ground is illegal when they're pushing gasoline down my throat? That's bullshit. I call bullshit. That's shenanigans. What the heck's going on here? I'm not a car. I do not run on petrochemicals, and that's what they're trying to force on. I've got a greenhouse. I've started a business in the last 6 years based around a self-heating and cooling building design template.
My goodness, what haven't you been doing?
You know what? I was actually, you want to talk crazy nonsense, I was actually an apprentice of a man named Christian Ramasa, who was an apprentice of Salvador Dali. I paint prodigiously, and
oh, that's great. I'm ours too.
Good. It's the best. I tell you what, art's really the best medicine as far as for the spirit. I like to take my painkiller though with the art. I mean, it seems to synergize very well.
So it sounds to me like cannabis hasn't destroyed your life the way that our government has painted the picture, huh?
Cannabis has done nothing but enrich my life to a degree that I could not have known under petrochemical pharmaceuticals. That my life and the lives of those around me has been enriched beyond measure due to my use of cannabis. And since passing this ordinance in the village, we didn't used to see a police car ever in our village. I have single-handedly, as the mayor, during a time of immense budget cuts, made our little village of 33 people the most patrolled village in the state of Missouri. It's this constant threat mentality now, and we've had family members that have been harassed recently. We have a few other things that have been very shady going on. That for the idea of me speaking out for truth or trying to stand up for my rights is the kind of thing that will get me put in my place. Say, well, wait a minute. I thought my place was the land of the free and the home of the brave. I thought that I had a voice and I had the ability to speak out without fear of some right-wing outback law organization making their own rules to make sure I get in trouble. This doesn't sound very Americana to me. It sounds more like we've got a lot of corporate interests being backed by a lot of people that don't really care what the will of the people is, that don't really care about people suffering. I mean, I'm in real pain. I had, just 2 years ago, the doctor said, So world record bladder stone. He said I probably could have submitted it to Guinness. It was a bladder stone that was the size larger than a baseball in my bladder that they took out. I had a kidney stone, and they almost had to remove my entire kidney because of it. That took up the entire meat of my kidney. It was as big as my fist. They had to stick a 1-inch tube straight cut into my kidney to send a laser down there with a sonic blaster and break it up over the course of a week's worth of surgeries. Now, hey, I'm not saying morphine's completely bad. There are some things that morphine is good for. When someone sticks a 1-inch tube in your kidney, you better have some morphine there, because you need to be sedated blind. That kind of pain isn't the kind of thing that cannabis is gonna work for. That's medical, surgical procedure stuff. And that's what that kind of drug should be intended for. Not for every day, oh, your back really hurts, you have all these kidney stones coming out, you've got all these chronic problems. Here, let's dope you up beyond your gourd forever and ever.
Forever and ever.
And that's, I mean, I can't speak highly enough about how my life has been profoundly enriched, and the people around me by this sacred plant. And I look forward to the day when we have the right to keep and bear farms. when I can scream to the mountaintops, free at last, thank God Almighty, my weed is free at last. You know, I want to be able to grow my own medicine and know that it's not going to some drug organization. I mean, the price of cannabis, and it was mentioned on another speaker today, you know, about a year ago, ounce for ounce, cannabis was worth the same as gold, sometimes more in a lot of places. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Who is giving the value of a flower that I can grow with virtually no effort whatsoever? Who is ascribing that value to that flower? And when you look at it, the drug dealers, on one side of the coin, the police departments are on the other side of that coin. That those two things don't exist in the empowerment they do unless there is the law to enforce these kind of prices. I mean, it's the abysmal results of prohibition all over again on a large scale over decades and decades and decades. We're doing nothing but empowering thugs with drugs. We're empowering it's the bread and butter for the most depraved social institutions you can imagine. And it's not gonna be a pretty future if we don't stand up and do something about it. If we don't stand up and say, hey, we're the 78% majority. Where are my rights? Where are my constitutional rights? Speaking of the Constitution, a document written on cannabis paper. And it's like, you look at that and it's like, well, wait a minute. The police take an oath of office to uphold and protect the Constitution of the United States of America. How can they be protecting one word of that document if they can't even protect the paper that it's written on? I mean, there's something seriously amiss here in our great country. I mean, the paper that made every page of every Bible, that brought us the great message of the teachings of Jesus throughout the ages, that message was brought to you by cannabis and now is so shunned by the religious communities. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. They don't know where their roots are. They don't know where their heart is. And of course, that could go into a whole nother subject.
Every major religion in this world has got roots in cannabis.
Yeah, most definitely.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and the chronically ill of our state and our nation for the efforts you've done, the sacrifices you've made, and tell you that appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
And keep up the good work, buddy.
Thank you.
That's it.
Great job.